Okay, and so now in lesson 6, part 2, we're going to continue with this quad. I've duplicated the layers here, and so we're going to, animate this. So now we've done a motion effect on that, we scaled and just positioned it so they're static. But now we want to animate these. We want to bring these in and sort of create a build. So you see how I can click up and down in my timeline down here, and I of course reveal each clip. I reveal their properties in the effects control, right? So that's great navigation. I'm going to reset the playhead at the very beginning of each clip for now. Okay, so they all have the basic position and the scale adjustment, but there's no other keyframe, so there's no movement. So let me reset that by go to previous keyframe. Now let's go ahead and go over here. I'm going to actually hide this for a second and pretend you were still in the project panel. We're going to go into the effects panel. Right now, remember, you have an effects panel which houses your actual video effects, transitions, and that sort of thing. And then you have the effect control panel, which is where you manipulate those effects and those properties. Okay, so those are two different things. We know that, but just reiterating. So let's go back to video effects here. Open up video effects, and in the perspective folder, let's grab this basic 3D, which is basically a motion effect, but it gives us 3D capability. Okay, so right now, let me go back into my timeline. I'm going to select my first layer, my top layer on video 4, the Agana whatever, which is this one in the upper left. Okay, I'm just going to release that. And because I'm already in the effects control panel, I can drag that, I can click and drag that effect and just pop it right in there. So it shows right up and I can see the attributes and the properties. Now there's a number of things I can manipulate. I can swivel, I can tilt. Let's just do swivel for now. And so we're going to set an additional move on this, okay? So the swivel will allow it to do this. Let's go forward approximately maybe about a quarter of the way through the clip, okay? And we're going to add a second keyframe, okay? This is essentially like a 3D rotation. So it's supposed to 2D, it's 3D. So let's set the value here at 2, and you got to use a lowercase x. Seems to prefer that. And now let's just play that back for a second. So it's going to give you this kind of movement, right? So more of a three-dimensional swivel as opposed to just a two-dimensional rotation. Okay, and so that's transpiring over the course of a few seconds there. Okay, hang on, I added another keyframe up here for some reason, which we don't want. So let me just highlight and delete those. There we go. Okay, so we've got a rotation going. Now what I think would be fun to do is let's also add a scale adjustment. Okay, so that it zooms into the image and it reveals it swiveling. So I'm going to use the swivel keyframe as a reference point, right, for where I want it to end, right? And then I'm going to come up here to scale. I'm going to set a scale keyframe. It will record, of course, the existing value. Then I'm going to jump back to the beginning of scale, go back to that first keyframe and set that at 0. Okay, enter. Now let's preview that down here in the timeline, and you'll see that this is what it's going to do. So it's going to start at 0 and swivel up over 2x. If you want to make it swivel more, make it a 3x. Okay, so now let's jump down to the second layer, the clip on layer 4, which is, remember, if you always want to know where this is, hit your transform tool. Okay, so it's the one just to the right to it. I'm going to release that transform tool. And now, actually, I'm going to jump back now for a minute, sorry, back to the first layer, right? And position my playhead on those keyframes, because my goal here is I want them to both swivel and land at the same time. So I'm using the keyframes from that first, from that layer, that clip on layer 4 as a reference. Now, keeping everything open, just click on that clip below it and boom, there it is, right? So now I am on this clip. I'm going to add a position marker on scale since I'm right there for now. And then I'm going to come down here and drag my basic 3D over. Click and drag, boom, assign it. Hit swivel, right, which will add a keyframe. Come here, click 2x. Okay, right now I still have to set the first keyframe. So let's jump back to the first keyframe. On scale, set that at 0, right? Enter. And then on the swivel, set that at 0. Because you need to have, remember, two keyframes, different values. So now that will also do the same thing, right? And it times out perfectly with the other one. Again, this is just one example. They don't always have to time out uniformly, but I'm doing that as part of my objective. All right, so I've got 2 clips, swiveling and landing. Okay, now I think it would be much to have all 4 swivel, because sometimes you want to be careful not to overdo your effects. Okay, so let's go down to one of the bottom layers. Let's jump back to the first frame here. Bottom layer. So it's going to be, which one of these is it? It's this one down here on the left. Okay, this sort of sunrise thing. Okay, so once again, let me jump back up here, and I'm going to go to my end keyframes first. Okay, so I am going to select that layer now. There I am. So I'm on the clip on video 2 right now. Right? As you can see, it doesn't have as many keyframes because I haven't added them yet. Right? So while I'm here, let's add. Actually, I'm going to leave scale alone. Here's what I'm going to do. These 2 up top will swivel. These 2 on the bottom will slide in from the left and from the right. So I'm not going to do any swivel. I'm just simply going to do a position adjustment. So the marker, the playhead right now is marking the end frames for my first 2 layers. So let me come back down to the layer I want to adjust, and I'm going to add a position marker there. I'm not going to change the value because that's my end point. So I'm going to jump back to the first keyframe, and then I'm going to adjust the X value to the left. So I'm going to drag it so it slides off to the left. So that's its start position, just off frame, right, off screen. Then I'm going to click again down here, and this is my one remaining image over here on the right. Okay, so I will actually, hang on, I forgot. I'm going to come back up here because I always need that end reference. So the one I just set, I jump back to that keyframe, leave it there. Now come back to the one I want to adjust, set that position keyframe so it matches the move on this one. So these 2 will end at the same place. Okay, so now I will jump back to the first keyframe. This is adjusting the bottom layer still. And now I will move it back to the right. So again, you can do this in different order as long as you use those references, those keyframes on other layers as references, just like what you've done before with titling. So now let's take a look at this. Let's preview this. So there you go. The top 2 layers swivel in. They have a swivel and a scale adjustment, and the other ones are just kind of sliding in from the left and right. So they all end in the same spot because I set the end keyframes in the same place. Now they don't always have to end in the exact same moment, but they just did for my objective on this little technique, this little example. So now let's do some fine tuning here. Let's go to the end frame of each clip. This is the very bottom clip, and right click on it. Right click on that end frame, and again, your playhead technically doesn't even have to be on there. So as long as you're on that clip, then right click on that end frame and go into temporal interpolation and select ease in. This is to sort of smooth out that final end keyframe, and so it lands a little smoother. All right, so let's move up to the next layer, which is same kind of thing. That's the other one that's sliding in from the left. Right click on that keyframe, and in the drop down temporal interpolation, ease in. Okay, and you notice also how it changes shape. Now we're going to move up to the other 2 layers. Now that has 2 end keyframes, one for scale and one for swivel. So same thing, right click on the one up top, and there it just gives you the straight up drop down, ease in. Right click on the swivel and do an ease in. So you're smoothing out not only the scale, but the actual rotation, the actual swivel. Okay, and then on the final one, there we go, same thing, rinse and repeat. Ease in and ease in, and now you should hopefully see a difference. When they end, they'll just sort of like slow down at the end. It'll just be like a little smoother. It's just like a little smoother of a landing. I think you can see that there pretty evidently. Instead of sort of snapping into that end position, they sort of like right at the very end, they just kind of glide in. Okay, now I'm going to do a quick save. Now we're going to do one more thing. I'm going to add a little topping to this ice cream situation here. All right, we're going to do a little nesting here, right? So we've got 4 layers moving independently, coming into play, doing different things, right? Now we're going to click and drag over all 4 layers. We've done a little bit of this before, okay? And anywhere on that selection, all 4 layers selected, right click. It brings you into the menu, all right? And this is a right click, and you're going to go right around to the center where it says Nest. Click on Nest, and you get another window that wants you to identify these layers. So let's call these, quad box. I'm going to capitalize that. I'm going to call this quad boxes effect. Okay, I'll hit OK. And what that just did is, over here in the project panel, it actually just saved that as a sequence, right? So it saved those original layers, but here it converted it into one single layer. Okay, so now I can actually do an effect on top of all four of these effects. And here's what I'm going to do. What I'd like to see happen is they come in, and then as they land, instead of sitting still, I want to have them all scale a little bit more, like continue, almost like a very slow, gradual move. So I can click on that nest, and it comes up as just one layer. You see? So I'm going to find that endpoint. Okay, and right about at that endpoint, I'm going to hit a scale. I'm going to put a keyframe there. Okay, and then I'm going to go towards the end and add another keyframe and set that at like 110. So it's a very small adjustment from the end. Okay, so it still houses all those other effects, but now you've added one more effect on top of all the layers, and so they land, and you see how they push in. Now, if you want to time that a little better, I want to see that move. See, the move starts after they land in their final end frame. So let's actually start having them move a little bit earlier. So I'm going to move up this first keyframe on the scale so it starts pushing in while they're still sort of zooming out and moving in, and it'll just make it look like one fluid move. See, just like that. So that's a nice way to add a little more detail and smoothness. And so there you can see that they're scaling up. So that's bonus points there. You've taken 4 layers, you've done motion effects, a video effect, and then you nested them, and then you manipulated all 4 layers at the same time. Okay, we'll continue with some other tutorials in a second.